There's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Welcome to another fantastic installment from very, very high above all the puerile and contemptuous forms of Wyoming mainstream media. This is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Friday. Now, is it just me, or has this week gone, really, really, really slow? I mean, it feels that way, but we've had a lot going on this week. Yesterday on the program, if you missed it, we had a great discussion with Representative Tom Kelly, and the reason why I started here is I want to point out to you that if you go to the Cowboy State Politics website, there's a link right up at the top that says live replay or something like that, live. And if you click on it, it will take you to all of the previous live episodes. So if you ever miss an episode of the program, you can go right there and check it out. On today's show, of course, it's Friday, and on Fridays, I put this program under enormous strain. That is, I let you call in, and we just talk about whatever you want to talk about. So yes, my friends, today it's Open Line Friday. That's right, my friends. Open Line Friday on Cowboy State Politics Live. This is the day where we talk about whatever you want to talk about. You see, normally during the rest of the week, you kind of have to talk about what I want to talk about. And even sometimes, Agent 29 wants to talk about things, and I just, it's almost like I try to shoo him out the door. No, we're not talking about this. Well, that's not really true, my friends, because he's controlling everything over there. But anyway, today we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. And the phone number here in the studio is 307-374-8989 if you want to be part of the program. 307-374-8989. Go ahead and give me a call. Whatever it is, we'll talk about it. And there's a lot of stuff to talk about in the media. Of course, Iran and Israel, there's the ceasefire that apparently is still holding. There's all sorts of stuff going on with Wyoming politics. School districts across the state, and this is one of the things I want to get into today, but school districts are trying to tell homeschool parents that they still have to inform the school of what it is they're going to teach their kids. And first of all, I mean, with that one, this one really irritates me because it goes to what is the proper role of government? You see, way before teachers' unions and all those groups took over our education system, it was up to the parents. The school was the employee of the parents, and still is. It's just most people don't see it that way. Because we have statutes that say, hey, your kid has to go to school, and whatever happens at the school, I mean, they kind of try to treat it like Vegas, whatever happens at the school stays at the school. And it wasn't until COVID and there was a lot of, schools that were all doing everything at home, virtually, online, whatever you want to call it. And a lot of parents became very aware of what was happening at school. And so we saw a huge shift from parents sending their kids to public school and then instead finding out that that's a screwed up idea and deciding just to homeschool them. Because the truth is, you can teach your kids just as effectively as any public school can. Well, we're part of the, I don't know what you want to call it, the row, the uproar, whatever it is through activities. In fact, I read an article this morning, it may have been in the Cowboy, how the school district in Rock Springs is telling homeschool parents that their kids can't participate in middle school sports. Now, this one is kind of a touchy one because state law says that in high school, if you're a homeschool parent, your kids can participate in high school activities. But it really doesn't say anything about middle school. And so in Rock Springs, they're just saying, well, no, your kids aren't going to participate in middle school. Now, they try to couch it in terms of finances, that it costs way too much money for your kids to be able to play sixth grade soccer or sixth grade football. The truth is, it has nothing to do with the money because our schools are outrageously funded. And when you're over $20,000 a student in a small state like Wyoming, there is plenty of money floating around. So any assertion that it costs too much to allow your kid to participate in sixth or seventh grade football or basketball or whatever the case may be, it is really kind of a spurious claim. What it is the school district's attempt to lash out at the legislature and lash out at homeschool parents. How dare you have the audacity to say that you can educate your children better than we can? So there's a lot going on with that. It's not just activities. It's the curriculum. It's everything. And fortunately, Agent 29 is pretty well versed in that. So we'll talk about that later on in today's program. But where I want to begin the show is with a piece in the Federalist, and it's entitled from the New York Times. That's not part of the title, but from the New York Times, people who ignore media's fake outrage give Trump high approval ratings. So this one's kind of contradictory from the outset, because when we ignore the fake media, the fake news, the outrage that they're always trying to drum up, it's almost as if automatically Trump's approval ratings go up. So if you ignore all the bull crap that's being spewed in the mainstream press, of course the president is going to look better. But, everywhere in the media, and it doesn't really matter which outlet you're talking about, perhaps except for Wyoming, because even, in Wyoming, like places like the Cowboy, they at least have to have a veneer of being somewhat Republican, because the vast majority of the state are registered Republicans. And if they went full-blown radical liberal leftist like the Casper Star Tribune, well, then nobody would read them, which is why the Casper Star Tribune is, their circulation has been dying for the last several years. It's because they sold out to a Virginia-based company, and the only thing they really produce is, way left of center opinion. So the Cowboy can't really go that far. They've got to kind of sound a little bit Republican. We're going to talk about them a little bit later on in the show. But everywhere else in the media, at every opportunity, there's an attempt to denigrate President Trump. It doesn't matter if it's bombs in, the bombing in Iran, or if it's the economy, or if it's, this shutting down the Department of Education, whether it's any of this stuff. The immediate default position for the media is attack Trump. And from their perspective, from our perspective, it makes sense. My perspective, anyway, is that they're all suffering from Trump derangement syndrome, every single one of them. And so anything that happens, like I said, their default position is, how does this make Trump look bad? Well, if you ignore that, and you don't pay any attention to it, and you look at what's actually happening in your life, things are going pretty good, if you ask me. I don't know when the last time you filled up your car at the gas station was, but oil prices are dropping, dramatically. In fact, the day after the bombing in Iran, everybody thought, all of the talking heads, all of the intelligentsia, the experts on TV said that oil prices were going to spike because Iran was going to cut off the Straits of Hormuz, and that's where if you didn't know, that's where a lot of our oil travels through. But they're going to do that. And it's just Iran, and it's instability in the Middle East, and all of it's going to cause a huge spike in oil prices. You know what happened? The price of oil dropped a lot. It dropped like $30 in one day. So, and I didn't check it this morning to see where it's at. I'm sure it's kind of, come up a little bit. But still, oil prices dropped dramatically, which what you're seeing at the gas pump is lower prices at the pump. You see, when conservative policies are put in place, it makes it easier for everybody. And on the things that you buy on a daily basis, gasoline, food, those sorts of things. So if you ignore what the media is telling you, obviously Trump's approval ratings are going to go up. From the piece, and I quote, "It was an incredible self-own when the New York Times recently ran the headline, 'One thing helping Trump's approval rating. Some people are not paying attention.' An alternate heading could have easily read, people who don't read this paper are infinitely happy, study finds." The article from mid-May by Ruth Ijelinek. Why do all of these people they write about have names that are hard to pronounce? It's like they're out to get me. Anyway, it was based on a Times Siena poll that asked respondents whether they approved or not of President Trump's performance on various issues, including immigration and the economy. It also asked how informed they were on certain so-called major events. Quote, "Voters who have not heard much about some of the major news events from the first 100 days of Mr. Trump's second term have a higher opinion of the job he's doing." I wonder why that is. Because they're not reading the bullcrap that is being printed about what's actually happening what actually happened in the first 100 days. Because most of it was a distortion. Trump was inaugurated, and then probably that afternoon, he started fulfilling campaign promises. One of the big ones was eliminating DEI and getting a handle on all of this craziness, men and women's sports, the DEI hiring, the racism that was that had permeated the Democrat Party. Of course, you can't eliminate that, but the racism in policy, the DEI hires, all of that was attacked on day one. The energy sector, unleashing America's energy economy, making it so oil companies could do what it is that they actually do, drill for oil. And so the first 100 days, though, Americans didn't see the results right away, but it happened very quickly. And, the media, of course, they can't give Trump a win in any way, shape, or form. They can't have him looking respectable at all. And so people like the New York Times, outlets like the New York Times, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal to some extent, ABC, PMS, NBC, the Communist News Network, all of them went to work trying to make, in any way that was possible, make Trump look bad. And that's what they attempted to do. But as it turns out, when Americans think that things are going well for them and the overall quality of their lives is improving, they don't pay attention to the media, because there's no reason for them to ascertain why it is that their circumstances are the way that they are. When things are good for people, they do the normal things that people do. Go out time, spend time in the mountains, spend time with your family, go work on your backyard, and not pay attention to the idiots in the mainstream press. Now, the obvious point is to explain away Trump's approval numbers out of all of this, which have remained relatively stable and unremarkable as far as modern presidencies go, and in spite of ginned-up hysteria by the media. As of Tuesday, the Real Clear Politics average has the president at 46.8%, which is pretty normal for him. That was pretty much the average during his first term, so it stands to reason that his approval would be, bouncing right below 50% this time around. About 2 points higher than his record low from last term. Okay, so what happened? First 100 days, his approval rating goes up, then it kind of levels out a little bit, and then people kind of relax, the approval rating goes down, and it levels out to right where it is right now. So people must not, and the media's reaction to all of this is not, we're wrong, is not, hey, Trump's actually doing a halfway decent job. Their default position is orange man bad, Trump bad, we must explain it. And so the obvious conclusion that they come to is, well, we just haven't explained it enough, which, if you remember from the Barack Obama administration, that anytime one of his policies exploded, which imploded is probably a better word, their answer was, well, clearly you just don't understand. We just haven't explained it enough to you. Let me explain it again, you numbskull. That was the default position during the Barack administration, and it is for the media today. Well, people just haven't heard about all the chaos that Trump is creating. By major news events, The author naturally means fake controversy manufactured by dying news media, such as the New York Times. Those would include the Kilmar Abrego Garcia saga. Let's talk about that one for just a little bit. The Democrats latched onto him like a lobster on your finger that doesn't want to be eaten. They were not going to let go because he's just a Maryland man. He's a family man. He works hard. He just takes care of his family. No. Pay no attention to the MS-13 tattoos that are on his fingers. Don't pay any attention to that. We know that he's a human trafficker, but really he's not that bad of a guy. At least he's one of the nice ones. But the Democrats latched onto him because he was, in their estimation, a normal guy. Just think about that for a second. The Democrats tried to cast him as a normal, everyday American guy. And if he, Abrego Garcia, is what the Democrats think is a normal person, there's yet another reason why Americans are not paying attention to the Democrat Party, because their life experiences definitely don't match up to the MS-13 gang-banging human trafficker, illegal alien Abrego Garcia. We're just not that type of person, no matter what how the media tries to cast aspersions at conservatives. Now, to some degree, this worked. Even in little Sheridan, Wyoming, our little burg had all sorts of protests. Granted, they weren't that widely attended. However, the Democrats that do exist in Sheridan did go down and protest, so at least their message was resonating a little bit. But there again, most of the people that I talked to at these protests were your pretty well diehard liberals. In fact, the recordings I have, I had intended to get some sound bites to play them for you, but they're so crazy that I don't even think it's worth it. We all know that Democrats are off their rocker, which is why nobody's paying attention to them. But my point here is that at least to some degree, the Abrego Garcia thing did resonate with some voters, the loyal Democrat base. But they were all made-up controversies. Respondents had said that they had heard about a story that gave Trump a lower approval rating than those who said they hadn't heard or had only heard a little bit about it, according to the New York Times. But rather than consider that consuming excessively negative and fake news would logically lead a person to a more negative view, the author suggested it's a bigger problem that Trump's approval ratings aren't suffering more because a lot of people have obviously tuned her and her peers out after realizing how routinely deceptive their narratives are. This is another problem with the Democrat Party, and it's another reason why people aren't paying attention to them. Their memory is very, very short. Conservatives, and most people for the most part, have very long memories, especially when it comes to things that directly affect their daily lives. The price of eggs, the price of milk, the price of bread. Most Americans don't forget when they have to go through hardships. By hardships, I mean that it takes all of the money in your wallet to fill up your tank full of gas so you can get to work. Most people remember those things. It's often said in the media that voters have a very short memory. I don't necessarily believe that. And I think that Trump's approval ratings show that because they know what the Democrats did and they're not easily going to forget it. After all, how many hours of sound bites did Joe Biden and Kamala Harris give us proving that the Democrats didn't have any idea what they were doing? That they destroyed the economy, that they did their very best to get us into all sorts of situations where America was knocked down a peg or two. Where how many times did they attempt to tell us that America shouldn't be great? Now, of course, it never came out that way. They just tried to phrase it in terms of these MAGA people. Well, what exactly is MAGA? Make America Great Again. That resonates with American voters simply because we remember what America was when Trump was president the first time. We remember what Joe Biden and Kamala Harris and Nancy Pelosi and the Democrat Party turned America into through 4 years. And now we know what America can be again. And so it makes perfect sense that American voters are not going to pay attention to the media. And no matter how many times the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, or any of the fake news media outlets try to explain it away, it's not going to work at all. So that, my friends, is why Americans aren't paying attention to the Democrats because, and here's the other thing about it. I get enormous enjoyment out of paying attention to the Democrats. And if you just look at it in terms of entertainment, I mean, turn off the stupid sitcom that you are watching and instead go to YouTube. Go to YouTube and you can watch all sorts of funny videos like this one. Now, this is Representative Brandon Gill, and they're talking about. I was going to use this later, but it fits in perfect right here. But he's got one of an academic in front of him, and she's trying to defend all of the Doge cuts. Take a listen to this.
Ms. DeVito, thank you for coming here. In your testimony, you said that Americans deserve a government that works for them, a government that makes their lives easier and more secure. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Great. I'd like to read through a couple of the grants that Doge has pulled back, and I'd like to get your take on them. They pulled back a $1.5 million NIH grant to Morehouse College. It was called the Center to Advance Reproductive Justice and Behavioral Health among Black, pregnant/postpartum women and birthing people. Do you think that makes Americans' lives easier and more secure?
I think that medical and scientific research of all types.
Do you think that constitutes critical research? According to your testimony, NIH grants are critical research?
I think that government research of all types in the medical,
including birthing people?
I think bench research of all types plays a fundamental role.
What is a birthing person?
Sir, I am here to talk
She
about
can't keep a
the
straight
Doge
face
impact.
either.
Well, I'm asking you about this
families.
grant and you're defending it. So I'm asking you who is birthing people?
I am not familiar with this grant. I take a position that all kinds of government research, medical,
Is a
pharmaceutical,
birthing person a woman? Is that another
biological,
word for female?
That is outside the scope of my expertise.
Seems like erasure language to me. I've been told that type of vernacular constitutes erasure language. How about another one? How about the conference, Gender Equity in the Mathematical Study of Commutative Algebra? Do you think that's a valid form of government spending?
I think mathematical research of all types is deserving of government.
What about studying, and this is directly from the National Science Foundation's website, women and non-binary mathematicians?
Again, I think all kinds of government investment should be dedicated toward mathematics.
All kinds of government investment. You don't have any kind of.
All right. So evidently, mathematics changes if you're a man or a woman, if you're non-binary or not. But this is the sort of insanity that the Democrat Party is inflicting on us, that apparently things that are static, mathematics. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that math changes if you're a man or a woman.
It might be racist.
That's true. Math might be racist, and it's probably racist because some of the best mathematicians are white. I don't know. I mean, this is one of the reasons, a perfect example of why Americans are tuning out the Democrat Party. And it's not just the media. The media is a representation of what's actually happening with the Democrat Party. It's the manifestation of it, right? So the Democrats enact a policy, and because most of the people in the media are Democrats, and actually, we've got a really good example of that a little bit later on in the program. You know what? Let me just dig through my stack of stuff here, and we may go there. Since we're talking about the media and we're talking about Democrats, we may just go there. And it's just going to take me a second here. Well, what I'm talking about is an appearance that Ogden Driscoll, old Augie, made on the Cowboy State Daily morning show, the Cow Pie morning show. And where is it? Anyway, we'll just go with it, and we can just play it from the computer.
Might as well just piss off all the right people.
I think so. I think we should piss off all the right people. And see, that's how you know you're doing a good job, Agent 29. I mean, if you are ticking off a whole group of people, then you're definitely doing your job. At least I am. I mean, that's the measure by how I know that I'm doing a good job. If I get a whole bunch of people and a whole bunch of really nasty comments on all the posts, well, then I know I'm doing a good job. So here is the Cow Pie, and he's talking about. All right, hold on just a second. Of course, that's old Augie. He's looking pretty good, isn't he? I mean, just his youthful self.
Actually, he's looking pretty good.
Is he now? I haven't seen him for
Yeah,
quite a while.
he's lost some weight and he's
There for a
doing well.
while, he kind of resembled a beached whale.
I didn't say that.
I did. See, and that's the danger of being my producer is that sometimes I just speak the truth. Well, here we have Jake on the morning show talking to old Augie, and just listen to this fair and balanced and completely informed characterization of the Freedom Caucus. Here we go.
Speaking of Senator Mike Giroux, he wrote a great letter to the editor for Cowboy State Daily. Really nice column, pointing out some things about the controversial rowdy group, the Freedom Caucus. Senator Driscoll, your best assessment of the Freedom Caucus, I think, your review of the 2025 legislative session was, well, they didn't do a horrible job. So what do you think? I mean, Freedom Caucus, as Mike Giroux points out, as I think we've all seen, they were somewhat fixated on national issues that maybe don't need to play in Wyoming or don't play at all. What do you think of the Freedom Caucus? You've worked with everybody at this point. You learned how to get along with Democrats. What about the Freedom Caucus?
All right. Hold on just a second. So that is a fair and balanced characterization of you guys. What do you think, Agent 29?
I'm so sick of this argument that all we're doing is the national things.
That's what you're doing.
Yeah,
that's what I
heard.
heard.
It's no secret that we went out and did a substantial amount of polling to find out what was on the minds of the Wyoming people.
Right.
And it was pretty overwhelming what we did. And that's why we set up the 5 and dime, and then we got it passed. Amy Edmonds, you don't know what you're talking about. And part of the reason, I think, is that most people are focused on national issues. That's what
Most people are.
That's how they watch. They won't even know the names of their state representatives. But when the state representatives begin to respond to what they're concerned about, we make progress. And that's what's scaring them, is they're no longer living in the dark.
Well, and it's if you pay attention like I do, you notice that they are grasping for an argument. Anything that they can use to make conservatives look bad. Now, in the recent past, they haven't had to worry about it because the Democrats in Wyoming have had a significant majority, and so they could really ignore the conservatives. Well, the past couple of sessions, that's not well. The conservatives have gained power, and in this last legislative cycle or elective cycle, of course, the Freedom Caucus took power in the House. Well, now. They don't have the luxury of ignoring the Freedom Caucus, and so they have to find an argument to beat them up with, or try to beat them up with. And the one that and here's the thing: when you've done the polling, when you know what's on the minds of your voters, you can't argue with them. And the Democrats, as crazy as they are, as insidious as they are, they're not stupid. They recognize. When they're in the disadvantaged position, right? They know that the vast majority of Wyoming people, they responded to the poll. I'm sure most of their strategists saw the poll themselves or were polled. And so they know that the 5 and dime plan, those were the top 5 issues that came out in the poll, which, by the way, Amy Edmonds, and let's just talk about her for a second since we're talking about the media. I think so. They don't have the argument that those aren't the things that Wyoming citizens care about. And so their next argument is, well, those are national issues. You see, even though they're the Freedom Caucus and they're not making this argument as eloquently as I am, but instead of saying, those are national issues. And while those are important, and this is the way that, and I don't mean to give them an argument, but this is the way that they should have characterized it, said, even those are national issues, and occasionally we do see those things crop up in Wyoming. We're not really dealing with the real Wyoming problems, and they try to say Wyoming solutions for Wyoming problems. That's their one of their mantras, but they haven't cast the correct argument. Instead, they say, well, they're just focusing on national issues. They don't give a crap about what you're doing. Why that falls flat is all of the 5 and dime plans and a lot more of the legislation came from that polling. So the folks in the Freedom Caucus, they absolutely know that they're on point, that they know that their message is resonating with Wyoming citizens, which is why they've been gaining seats in the legislature. Makes perfect sense. But what I really want to talk about is the media. Now, I don't watch this Jake in the morning very often because I have my own show to worry about. And frankly, I do a lot better than he does. I'm like, hey, if you're not going to toot your own horn, nobody else is going to do it for you. And let's just be honest, when you're watching this show, way better than Jake in the morning. But his characterization of the Freedom Caucus, that they're this rowdy group, that, Senator Kangaroo Mike Giroux, he gave a pretty good op-ed. He had a great op-ed in the in the Cowboy State Daily, and it was really good. Let me just let me get to it here if I can find it. And here we go. Kangaroo Mike Giroux. Go ahead and throw this up on the screen. This is Kangaroo Mike Giroux. All right, moron. Anyway, and I quote, like most things in Wyoming, state government operates best when we all act in good faith. Okay, so first line out of his op-ed, Agent 29, y'all are a bunch of liars. Bunch of liars.
Yeah, you listen closely to what they say and how they say it, and you realize the disdain that they have for us.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
think Rush used to talk about this too. The disdain really isn't for us.
It's for you.
It's for the common people.
Yes.
And because that's who we are,
Mhm.
you don't understand the complexities and how government really works. You haven't been here for 10 or 12 years, et cetera, et cetera.
You just,
et cetera.
you just don't have the experience. Really, I mean, it is just a clown show. I mean, that's Tom Love now. But let me continue here. So Kangaroo Mike Giroux, a radical Democrat from Teton County, says, quote, it's not complicated. It's just the Wyoming way. We know we have challenges in state government. That's why we need serious leadership to meet those challenges. Okay, so then the implication being that the Freedom Caucus is not serious. But instead of rolling up our sleeves and doing the work of governing, proposing policy, debating bills, and crafting solutions, some lawmakers would rather distract. The loudest among them call themselves the Freedom Caucus. They shout waste, fraud, and abuse from the House and Senate floor or on social media, but they don't want to discuss their own record. Every conservative that I know will discuss their record because it's actually pretty good.
Which, by the way, Honor Wyoming's ratings came out yesterday.
Well, I don't want to. If you really want to talk about those, we will.
No, I'm just saying that's one of the things that we always point to is, hey,
Sure.
look at what we've done, look at our voting record, and the better educated people are on that, the more they like us usually.
Sure. So listen to this next piece here. Whether undercutting industry, decrying the process of producing good policy, or trying to preempt local government, the Freedom Caucus wastes your time and dollars. They waste time on unnecessary bills, they duplicate and contradict federal laws. They waste resources by increasing maternity deserts and with it, maternal mortality while threatening to collapse our remaining hospitals. So
now we're killing people.
Yes,
Yeah.
not only are you unserious, you're actually killing people. And this is the op-ed that Jake in the morning is saying was so great. There is not one example in here, not one concrete example proving why what Kangaroo Mike Giroux is saying. There's not one time where he says, let me give you an example of why I make this argument, why my argument is true. Instead, he says stuff like, quote, brazenly and sometimes gleefully, they like to make up their own studies and facts. So you're not serious, you kill people, and you're a liar. You make stuff up. A caucus member recently testified before a committee forcing a senator to inquire, where are you getting your information? Because it's wrong. The Freedom Caucus member insisted that her facts, in quotation marks, thank you, Cowboy, for letting him put that in there, were accurate because they were on a paper in my bag. That doesn't mean that the paper doesn't exist, and he doesn't go on to elaborate. And I didn't watch this committee meeting, but my knee-jerk reaction was they probably did something like this. And then showed it to them. but not Kangaroo Mike Giroux. You see, the only thing these Democrats and the Democrats that are in the Republican Party want to do or need to do, the only thing they do, bullcrap. Anyway, the only thing that they try to get accomplished is they lie. And I know it sounds like a simplistic argument, but I just gave you a whole bunch of examples of why that's true. And the Cowboy State Daily Morning Show, why don't you invite one of them on, one of the Freedom Caucus members on? Hey, why don't you invite me on, Jake? Oh, that's right, because I already do a better program during the same time you're on. We'll have more in just a second. It's spring-ish in Wyoming. Well, what that means for the uninitiated is that it's going to be 70 degrees one day and then snow 1.5 feet the next. And really, if you don't like those two options, just wait a little bit. The weather will change. I know, it sounds a little stressful, but really you should put your mind at ease and buy a pair of socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. They'll keep you warm and dry even on the nastiest, coldest spring-ish day, and they'll keep you cool and dry even when it's 75 and sunny. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. Trust me, you're not going to be disappointed. Are you one of those people that said something like this before Trump became president?
I have a house in Spain that is going to be ready right after the election. Siberia.
Nova Scotia.
I'm definitely moving to Canada.
Straight to hell.
Iceland. France.
Asia's pretty cool.
And has the past 5 weeks just been more than you could bear? If that's the case, you have come to the right place. All you need to do is call my friend Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market all across the state of Wyoming. Last year, she sold around $30 million worth of property. Everything from small residential properties all the way up to big giant ranches. So if you've got to get the heck out of Dodge, if you've got to be gone Johnson because you can't stand that Trump is the president, call Rebecca Bextel. Her phone number is 307-699-3519. Let me say that one more time for you in case you missed it. 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Cowboy State Politics is only going to expand. This program is man, it's just getting so big that it's hard to contain it. I have a hard time myself. I mean, 33 on the list of the 100 conservative podcasts you should be listening to. Pretty incredible. Welcome back to the program, my friends. Open Line Friday on Cowboy State Politics Live. If you want to be part of the show, the phone number is 307-374-8989, 307-374-8989. Whatever you want to talk about, if you got something on your mind and I haven't talked about it, or you just can't, you can't keep it in and you got to talk to somebody about it, hey, why not? Why not talk to me? So give me a call, 307-374-8989. Now, yesterday on the program, I was telling you, and I think that we discussed, at length, that even though we were able to destroy the Iranian nuclear sites, I mean, that's a victory, did a good job. I mean, I don't think those things are going to be up and running anytime soon. That's not the end of it. It would be naive to assume that there are not terrorists in this country. After all, the Biden administration let in millions of people, a lot of whom, they didn't even check to see who they are. There was no vetting. There was no nothing. And That doesn't include all of these so-called gotaways, the people that Border Patrol never came into contact with. And again, I've heard numbers of, there were 700 Iranian illegal aliens that came in the country. Tom Homan says 1,200. I think that the reality is we probably don't know, and it's more accurate to say there's a whole bunch of them. And in fact, and just to prove it to you, there's been a trial already in process. Well, the charges have been in process, but they've recently set a trial date for 3 men charged in an Iranian assassination plot against President Trump. Perhaps you remember these folks getting arrested. Farhad Zakari, an asset of the Iranian regime, allegedly plotted the assassination of Iranian dissident Masha Alinejad, in addition to President Trump. The 3 men charged in an alleged Iranian plot to assassinate President Donald Trump and an Iranian dissident on U.S. soil now have a trial date, March 9th of 2026. I never understood why it takes so long to set a trial date for, big high-profile cases. You would think that, hey, we want to get this one off the books immediately. This one is of, preeminent importance. But no, it's next year. The judge set the date at a pretrial hearing between the Department of Justice and 2 of the accused, Carlisle Rivera and Jonathan Lodeholt. Both defendants appeared shackled in the courtroom. A third accused man, Afghan-born Farhad Zakari, did not appear in court and is currently hiding out in Tehran. So the Afghan national is accused of having plotted the assassination of President Trump on behalf of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard. He immigrated to the U.S. as a child before being deported in 2008 after serving a 14-year sentence for robbery. And the Biden administration let him in. Fantastic, according to prosecutors. And so he is an asset of the Iranian regime. And that's the terminology that they use. The Zakari and his IRGC contacts informed him that the country had already spent, quote, a significant sum of money on efforts to murder Trump and was willing to continue spending a lot more money in its attempt to procure assassination. I think it's fascinating how they put that. Procure assassination means they're buying it. So they have an asset in the country, and this is just one of them. And so they're just going to spend a crap load of money to make sure that happens. And, I think it's pretty naive if we assume that, okay, we caught him, case closed, we're done. I think that's extraordinarily short-sighted. The article continues, quote, the targeting of former and current American officials, including President Trump, by brazen foreign actors will never be tolerated, a Department of Justice spokeswoman told the Washington Free Beacon. The Department of Justice will use every tool at its disposal to disrupt this egregious activity, blah, blah, blah. Of course they will, and we should absolutely expect them to do that. Now, you add on top of it the blow that Donald Trump dealt to the Iranians earlier, I guess late last week. Man, things are happening so fast that it seems like the bombing of Iran was weeks ago, but in reality, it was only a couple of days ago. So, absolutely incredible. But if you think that the Iranians were just going to stop after that, you are sadly mistaken. We are dealing with a regime that for 50 years has taken one setback and then figured out plan B. They've taken another setback and they've gone back to the playbook. They'll take another setback and the catcher will flash a different sign. That's what the Iranians do. Just because you destroyed their enrichment facilities and the Fordow nuclear sites and Isfahan and all of those, all 3 of them, that definitely, I think it makes it more certain that there will be an attack somewhere. Maybe not, if not in the country, maybe outside of the country. Who knows? But I think that this is far from over, which only means that we should beef up our law enforcement efforts, that we should be more vigilant. And here's the other thing too. We have a tendency to think that because we live in a secluded Wyoming town, and let's be honest, if you live in Wyoming, and even if you live in Cheyenne or Casper, it's still kind of secluded, right? There aren't that many people that live there. Our big cities are nothing in comparison to New York or Houston or Austin or anything like that. So still kind of a small town. But Even in small town Wyoming, there have been instances where illegal aliens have been caught committing crimes. The last one I remember here in Sheridan was a couple of attempted ATM robberies. And then there's been several, people arrested for driving without a license and, I mean, just a variety of different crimes. So they
No,
are
those
in our community.
those were county commissioners.
It's true. Riding along in my automobile. I don't think I have that soundbite queued up. It's been so long since I've had to use it that, well, let's see here. No, but I do have this one.
Horse crap.
But my point is that in every community, there are illegal aliens. It is possible in every community that there may be people that would want to do this country harm. It's I just think that we should assume that that's probably going to happen somewhere. So everybody's got to be a little bit vigilant. So moving on. Yeah, no kidding. So I mentioned earlier in the program that there's now quite a few hearings going on about all of the Doge cuts and why these programs actually exist. Now, a lot of this stuff, and again, none of these ideas really work in the real world. They work in academia on paper, where a bunch of eggheads are sitting around saying, hey, maybe it is possible, theoretically, philosophically, for a man to believe he's a woman and then become a woman. They're talking about essences and really esoteric stuff that doesn't have any meaning in the real world. And before you say, oh, David, you just don't understand. I mean, I did study a lot of philosophy. I was going to go to law school at one point. I've got a pretty good library, and I'm pretty well read. But a lot of this stuff, and I've got some, feminazi news later on in the stack of stuff that I can't wait to talk about. So, yeah. I mean, the only place that these work are in the philosophy departments of most universities or in the gender studies program. Listen to this one. University of Wisconsin provides nearly $136,000 to a student sex group that gives ethical porn programming. I would love to know what ethical porn is. I was always thought that I always knew that porn, by definition, is exploitative. You are either exploiting the person that is viewing the porn or exploiting the person that is making the porn. But in just kind of in general, porn cannot be ethical. And I quote, the University of Wisconsin at Madison has reportedly approved doling out $136,000 to fund a group that provides sexual programming, including a 90-minute ethical porn session for students. The approved budget for the fiscal year 2026 says that the Sex Out Loud Club, billed as peer-to-peer sexual health resources, requested $136,000 for the 2025-2026 and was approved to receive $135,000. Their budget allocates $90,000 for salaries. So out of that entire 136, the vast majority of it, almost $100,000, goes to salaries to pay the idiots that think that this stuff is worth teaching, and over $41,000 for supplies. What do you suppose the supplies are for ethical porn production? I mean, I don't know what that could be. $40,000 worth of condoms. Perhaps we should ask Sarah Burlingame how far $40,000 in condoms goes. And again, this is another example of don't think this only happens elsewhere. The Wyoming legislature, through the Wyoming Health Department, allocated $300,000 to LGBTQZXPWDS advocacy organization Wyoming Equality, $300,000 for condoms. I kid you not, my friends. You can look it up. So this stuff isn't just in Wisconsin or Michigan or New York. It happens right here in the good old Cowboy state. So the Sex Out Loud Club hosted a program called Sex After Dark in April. In an Instagram post, they advertised that the event would include a drag performance and bingo, as well as a sex toy giveaway, some of those supplies I was referring to earlier. Their website, which has a content warning for readers upon the opening page, says that, quote, their mission is to promote healthy sexuality through sex-positive education and activism, and says that it seeks to, quote, empower all students, by providing inclusive and accessible programs, events, and resources, and by creating a safe place where students can freely discuss their issues, not act on them. But these are the type of things that I think that most reasonable people would look at and say, we don't need to be spending tax dollars on those. Now, here's the big argument that we hear from the University of Wyoming and other educational institutions is, well, we're not using your money to fund these programs. We're using our money to fund these programs. No, wait a minute. So if you need the legislature to provide you, let's just use a round number, $1 million, because you allegedly have some expenses somewhere. I don't know, maybe you need to pay for staff, or you need school books or a computer or a desk, or, maybe a calculator or something like that. And you claim that $1 million is going towards those supplies. But you have $1 million to spend on a drag show training. Why then do we need to give you $1 million for your books and your calculators and all of that? Seems to me that the $1 million you were going to spend, and I'm not claiming that's how much they spent on there. I really have no idea what the total was, but it was a lot. But if you're going to spend $1 million over here on something obscene, like a drag show training that was exposed by Cowboy state politics, then why should I give you $1 million to cover these other expenses? If you're obviously going to waste it in one area, why do I need to cover your butt in the other area?
That principle that you're getting to, that's kind of been my theme for the last several weeks, is, when property taxes went up, we all had to figure out what we were going to leave out of our budget. And a government agency, though, is never supposed to have to cut anything. They are simply going to go out and get more. And where do they take it from?
I mean, Agent 29, this is the same thing as your friend comes to you and says, I need to borrow $500 for rent. And you say, you know what? You're my friend, and you can't be homeless, so I will loan you $500 for your rent. And then the very next night, you take the missus out for a night on the town. Perhaps you go dancing, or stop by the Mint Bar. It's for like 5 minutes. It's an interesting place. But you go out to dinner and then maybe drinks afterwards. And while you're at the Mint Bar, you run into your friend that just borrowed $500 from you for rent. And here he is on a drunken tear in the Mint Bar right after you loaned him $500. I think that would probably irritate most people. I think that they would probably think twice about loaning any money to that person who's going to spend their own money getting drunk while they're spending your money on rent. It's the same principle with all of these, university programs. They're funding all of these crazy programs, and then on the other hand, they go to the legislature and say, well, no. See, we need your money for all these legitimate things. And that's where we want to spend your money. But I rarely hear, and Agent 29, you can correct me if I'm wrong here, but I rarely hear anybody say, yeah, but you spent $5 million doing this stuff. What happened to that $5 million? Why couldn't you have used that money over here? Why should I give you more cash? I mean, I don't see those conversations happen all that often.
I actually have sound bites of a similar conversation that sometime we'll share. But
yeah, if you got a quick one,
let's catch it. Let's take a break and we'll come back to that, because
Okay.
I need
All
to
right.
set it up a little bit, and it is a little bit of a discussion. But
okay, all right, we'll do it. Well,
that.
it's Open Line Friday. We can talk about whatever we want to talk about. Though, if you'll notice, I do have an enormous stack of stuff here, and here's some stories that I'm totally going to get Agent 29 in trouble with, but we have to do it, my friends. Things have to be said, and I, of course, am the person to do it. More in a minute.
U.S. Coin Capital, we hear from Americans across the United States who have a growing concern about the future purchasing power of U.S. paper money. Many Americans are looking for an alternative for long-term capital. For more than 35 years, the people at U.S. Coin Capital have educated American investors on how to properly accumulate United States gold and silver coins. Call us at 1-800-878-2646 or visit us on the web, uscoincapital.com.
Make sure that you subscribe and follow the Cowboy State Politics podcast. You can do that from the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, or anywhere that you get your podcasts. That way, you'll make sure that you won't miss a single episode of Cowboy State Politics.
Some say standing up for what you believe in is being extreme. Ask any woman in Wyoming. They'll tell you this is called courage. The mainstream media claims that holding the line on important issues is being unreasonable. My mom taught me this is called staying true to our principles. In other places, people argue you always have to compromise to get something done. Here in Wyoming, we know that some things are worth protecting at all costs. Some say it's time we give up on the values that made our state great to accommodate toxic culture. I say it's time to stand tall and protect the values that have served Wyoming well for over 134 years. Join Honor Wyoming as we defend and preserve the Wyoming way of life. Find out how you can make a difference today.
Visit honorwyoming.org. Open Line Friday on Cowboy State Politics. If you want to be part of the show, the phone number is 307-374-8989. 307-374-8989 is the phone number in the studio. It's Open Line Friday, which means that we'll talk about whatever you want to talk about. And I have magnanimously extended that offer to Agent 29. Here's where we're going after it. So there's all these hearings going on Capitol Hill about all the Doge cuts. And I mean, we've all seen the headlines, you're paying for this ridiculous program, or the non-binary actions of, mathematicians and whether that changes the math. It's so ridiculous. You can't even make this stuff up. But the point is that we are paying for things like that, different crazy studies at universities, and still politicians want more of your tax dollars. And it still happens in the state of Wyoming, just on a smaller scale. And before the break, I said, well, how can they go to the legislature and request money when they've just done a drag show training? I mean, that doesn't make any sense. You spend $5 million of my money wasting it. Why do you need me to give you another $5 million? Well, Agent 29 actually has a good example of that. And it's going to take a while to set up, so take it away.
Thanks, David. Appreciate that. What follows it's about 10 minutes.
Okay. Do a stop and start on it.
Yeah, and it's very personal.
Okay.
So we have what we call a DD waiver. In the old days, if somebody had a development disability, they would just put them into a group home or something, and that was it. Put them into a facility. Well, we've become a little bit more enlightened, and rightfully so, and we're trying to set up a better quality of life for these people rather than just shove them into a box somewhere and forget about them. And so we want to mainstream them as much as possible. And this is an interesting program, and it's essential. But they had come to us because they're struggling for funds. That's what we always hear. And they were
struggling.
Yeah.
They spent their $5 million on a drag show training. Is
we'll
what you
get
mean.
to the numbers in just a second. They were asking basically to start off with for another $24 million to fund this, to kind of jumpstart it again and get people off the waiting list. People are waiting like 18 months before they can get help. And because this is something that I've had experience with in my life several times, I got up and I told basically 3 short stories. You'll hear those. And, well, we'll let it go from there.
Okay.
That was pretty well set up, so let's see what it has to say here.
All right. Maybe.
Representative
There we go.
Pendergraft, thank you for being willing to give some testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Co-Chairman. I did not plan on doing this, or you would have both been well aware of what I had in mind. But in listening to the conversation today, I thought it was that my experiences would be relevant, and I wanted to share. We've heard people talk about describe a day. I can personally describe for you day after day after day for years in 3 different cases. The first case was a gentleman in our church stopped along the road to help a disabled motorist. And while he was down between the 2 vehicles, the vehicles rolled together, crushed his head, suffered traumatic brain injury. Family found themselves basically without any income, with astronomical bills. And the church in that case came together, and about a dozen families made tremendous sacrifices. We paid the bills. We provided care for this individual who needed constant care day and night. We helped this guy's wife start a business and set herself up in a bookstore. We went out and anytime we found anything that she could possibly sell, we would try to buy it from her to try to help. This went on for a number of years until he did finally pass away, but it affected severely the lives of a dozen families, including my own, and it involved a tremendous amount of sacrifice. The second is the case of my sister-in-law, Bonnie, who was born with Williams syndrome. She had lived at home with her parents, her mother and her stepfather. At one point, it was discovered that her stepfather had been molesting her. I think a lot of you know how I feel about that. And I stood up and I said, that's enough. And we personally took her into our home and we cared for her. She did receive a little bit of Social Security.
Okay, hold on just a second.
But we...
All right, so right there, and I know you're not getting to the point yet, but
yeah,
something occurred to me that too often we rely on the government. That we think that whatever happens to us, however bad it is, huge medical bills or whatever, that for some reason that's the government's obligation to take care of us. And to some degree, I have to agree. I mean, we have disability payments. I happen to know something about that, but it is not always the government's responsibility.
Yeah,
we do have in a free republic, you have the responsibility to help yourself. To handle things that we can handle, and that's what I heard you talking about.
Yeah, the first example was it was more than any one person could have done because it would have devastated the family.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so what happened is a dozen families in the church took on that burden and shared it.
Yep.
They would go over and sit with him, take care of him, do the CNA things, and
sure,
and free her up partly to have some time to keep herself sane, but to start a business and to get some income. So the church took that responsibility. I don't know, this actually happened when I was very young. And so when I say our family, it was my parents.
Yeah.
But I have that example of it. This is where the church comes together and meets that need. And then in the next one that I'm talking about now with my sister-in-law, Bonnie, my wife even, she says that there was no Social Security at the time, that any money that came in was because Bonnie worked at Pizza Hut folding boxes.
Okay.
And maybe there was some of that. But the point is still the same. We did not immediately turn around and go to the government for help. In fact, we didn't want their interference as much as we could.
Well, and that's the correct attitude, because the Democrats and the left, they try to They try to paint the government's job as doling out charity, when in truth, it is impossible for the government to be charitable because, by definition, the government doesn't have its own money. That's your money. And somebody else cannot be charitable with your money.
Yeah.
Charity requires a sacrifice on your part. It's the Davy Crockett piece. It's not yours to give. And historically, the government didn't engage in charity. It was, if something happened to somebody, the church came together or the town came together. I can't tell you, growing up, how many times in Little Buffalo, Wyoming, did somebody need help? And it was like the whole town came together and made sure they had food, made sure they have clothes.
Well, even today we have GoFundMe.
Yeah.
How many times have you partaken in those?
Yeah, lots.
Yeah.
And so, I guess the point is that, it's not the government's job.
Yeah. However, I'm glad that some of these programs exist. And when I get to the third one in my testimony, that one, because of the complications there, you cannot, one family, one church could not afford to go to the Mayo Clinic every couple months and spend
that's
a
just
week.
not gonna happen.
It's just, it gets extraordinary at times. And that's what I think these programs are for, these extraordinary.
The extraordinary circumstances.
Yeah.
That's what
and
it's for.
That is a worthwhile thing for a community to come together. Now I sound like Trey Sherwood, but it is. It's a worthwhile thing.
It takes a
community
village,
to come
Ken.
together. Well, anyway, we'll continue on if that's all right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Made a number of personal sacrifices for a number of years to be able to provide. That was part of the theme that I was building here. Is it took sacrifice. It took sacrifice on the part of the church. My family had to make a lot of sacrifices. Her a safe place. She had to have a substantial amount of care. Imagine taking on another second or third grader who is an adult. The impact on the family was immeasurable in ways that I couldn't even enumerate if I were to write a book. We sacrificed, I personally sacrificed, my wife personally sacrificed a tremendous amount to be able to provide this. Eventually, it was more than we could handle, and she did go into the care of a group home. And that was a very welcome relief and a help. The third one is a co-worker of mine, actually co-pastor of mine at one point. And they had a child late in life who had all kinds of problems. The sacrifices made by a lot of us that were close to them to try to fill in the gaps and provide, even with the help of the state, were tremendous. These type of things are devastating, not only to a family, but to everybody that's around them. In my view, this is one of the reasons we have government. This is something worthy of supporting and worthy of doing right. And I don't want to see us go out there and say, you're going to have to do the job of a CNA, which is indescribable, which reminds me, I also spent 3 years on staff at a nursing home and got pretty intimately familiar with how that long-term care works and the challenges there. This is why we have government. This is something absolutely worth funding. However, I mentioned several times sacrifice. Before I sit down and authorize a 20 or 30 or $40 million check, knowing that taxpayers are already sacrificing, I want to look across the breadth of, for example, the Department of Health. If the Department of Health considers this to be a high priority, what's it willing to sacrifice to pay for it? I had to make that decision myself. When I took on these tasks, my wife had to do a lot of that. She couldn't work, so we gave up a lot. We look across other agencies across the state, and my point is that the state only has so much money. And we need to, as a body, look at these priorities, what is worth funding and what is, if you're going to fund it, you do it right. and you pay people what they should be paid. And then when you run out of money, you stop the spending. So I am all for supporting this as well as we can, but I am asking the Department of Health to look through your multi-billion-dollar budget and figure out maybe something you can sacrifice on behalf of the people. And with that, I'm open to questions. Okay.
I think that you're right in principle. I'm a little hung up on the language a little bit, because the people that sacrifice to fund the government and fund the enormous Department of Health budget, they are sacrificing. There's a lot of things that they would like to buy, but instead they have to pay their property taxes, or they have to pay their sales taxes, or they have to pay their income taxes. I mean, it is a sacrifice to pay taxes. And so I think in principle, yeah, you're absolutely right. But I think when it comes to government agencies,
sacrificing.
It's not sacrifice, right? It's
but think
do
about
your job.
Think about
do what you're supposed to be.
Think about Augie's comments, and they were in there right on the same time when he said, "What's it going to cost us?"
Yes.
And that's what I'm doing, and I'm talking to them and saying, "Look, this." You should have seen the faces in the room, and
sure.
even on the dais. I went down and sat in front so that I could watch everybody, and my testimony had an effect on a lot of people. And so then when I went to this idea of I sacrificed personally, what are you going to do?
Well, exactly.
So that's how that worked out. But what I wanted you to hear is the next couple minutes, our Director Johansson, he's the director of the Department of Health, and they have over a $2 billion budget. And now you say, was that biennial or what? Well, basically, Wyoming...
A billion here, a billion there.
Well, it's the same either way, because they have about a $2 billion budget, which Wyoming pays about half of.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a biennial budget of $2 billion, or they have $2 billion a year. Anyway, they have a lot of money.
Oh, yeah.
That's
a crap load.
Here's his response, and I just have to say it was very gratifying to hear at least some lip service given to what I had stated, and we shall see what happens.
Okay, hit it.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and thanks to the committee for taking up this topic. We look forward to the next meeting in Du Bois, and we'll have a lot of information for you, probably well in advance of that meeting. Something that resonated with me from Representative Pendergraft's testimony, and I'm very sympathetic to it. I have a handful of very large line item costs in my budget. And so it is natural, and I appreciate it, to wonder where could the Department of Health, with a $2 billion budget, trim or self-fund some of these costs. Over the years, I've been here since 2013, have prepared 3 rounds of budget reductions north of $100 million of general fund, usually matched by another $100 million of federal funds. We've taken significant money out of the budget and seen years where this body and the legislature put significant amount of dollars into our budget. We have a large budget. There's no doubt about that. Our top 5 line items account for just about 90% of the department's budget, and that's Medicaid, including these waivers. That's our developmental preschools, our mental health and substance abuse services in your community mental health centers, and our 24/7 facilities like the state hospital and the Life Resource Center. If you were going to rob the bank, that's where the money is. And so the exercise should absolutely happen to look at where we can free up funding. And part of those, the last couple of biennia, was Department of Health generated significant amount of savings or reversions, north of $100 million in both of those bienniums. The JAC deployed those funds in certain cost centers, kind of in a similar way that you were talking about, to avoid cuts or to fund priorities from the committee or the legislature. We are always at the table to do similar exercises. If there's areas we can offset to fund priority areas for the legislature, you have my word, we will do that. Lastly, Mr. Chairman, I think the theme that I've heard, I know we're talking specifically about the DD waivers today, but the theme that I've heard throughout your discussion and testimony is what is the core or safety net role of government that we should do very well or that won't happen if it isn't provided in this type of way. And I take that very seriously. Over the last couple of years, we've reoriented the department's strategic plan around that concept. What is core and safety net? You'll see that reflected in the new department strategic plan that we issued to.
So there's another question, and this is, I mean, I like what he said. You know, I mean, he's very clearly saying that, you know, yeah, are there places that we can cut? Yeah.
It just let me know that he's hearing what I'm saying.
Yes.
You choose your priorities. You figure out what we have to do, and do those things, do them well, and then look around and say what's left.
But the other part that you didn't hear him say, and I think that, I mean, maybe you could argue that it's implicit in what he was saying, but you never heard him mention, okay, so what are those things that are not core safety net types of things? So, you know, rainbow bags handed out in June, or $300,000 for condoms, or, I mean, there is probably a very long and distinguished list of things that the Department of Health is funding that definitely fall outside of their core mission. And so I think a telling piece of evidence that would indicate he was telling you the truth and that he's actually going to follow through is if you see a list of those things that they don't need to be spending our money on, that is not the role of government. And I might even argue that the scope of the Department of Health is way beyond
the proper role of
government. Now, I mean, one of those places that is in there, I think, is like the state hospital, okay, mental health services.
Mm-hmm.
Let me just give you a quick example. I talked to a sheriff's deputy and a county commissioner over in Gillette, and they have this guy that he strips naked, and then he likes to run around restaurants. And so what'll happen is the restaurateur, the owner, will call the cops and say, there is the naked guy running around the restaurant now, disturbing all of my customers. Please get him. So they come grab him, haul him to jail, and most jails are not equipped to handle a mental patient. And so what do? They can hold him for 72 hours, but you know, at some point, there's no way that they can send him, and the state hospital evidently doesn't have any beds, so you can't send him to the loony bin. And so what do you do with him? Well, you have to release him. Okay, then the very next thing he does is strips down naked and runs around Buffalo Wild Wings. I don't know which restaurant it was. Maybe it's the Mexican joint. But the point is, what do you do with those folks? All right, so that becomes kind of a necessary function of government. And now I think that there's a lot of things that are leading up to our increase in mental illness. And one of those is the increased amount of drug use. Government can do something about that. And one of those things is enforce the law. I know lots of people, and you read it occasionally in the newspaper, but lots of people that have committed multiple serious drug offenses, and they're given probation. Well, maybe if you followed the law and you threw the book at them, maybe that might deter people from getting involved in drug trafficking or anything else, right? You know, if you're going to go to prison for 5 years for doing what you're doing, maybe you would think twice about doing it. But there again, you know, you have the argument about what is addiction. Well, that plays into it, right? Like if you actually enforce the law. So a good example, drunk driving. Okay, we are constantly going to have a problem with drunk driving, but if you don't prosecute it, if you don't make an example out of people, then you're going to have people continually breaking the law. Well, you know,
as long as we have county commissioners, there's going to be.
That's where I'm going. Okay, so the sentence that Christy Haswell, riding around out of a bill, Christy Haswell was given was a year of probation. She had to do some mandatory training, and I'm assuming that she may have had to put one of those breathalyzer things in her car. Don't know if that's the truth, but most first-time DUIs, that's what you get. Well, all right, so does she, as a private citizen, deserve a larger punishment for a first-time DUI? No, she should get the same punishment as everybody else. However, she is in a position of authority. She's an elected official. She chose to get hammered, wherever she got hammered at, hop in her car, and endanger her constituents on the way home. You and I interviewed the person that called her in, and it was very clear that person was scared. that there was going to be reprisal for her telling the truth. So it's no different than, hey, you knew better. You're in a position of authority. We're going to sock it to you. If we had judges that would do that, it would provide a deterrent. I'm not saying in every case, but I'm saying it would most definitely help. Secondarily, and this is a national problem, illegal immigration. There is a ton of drugs that flew across both the northern and the southern border, and flooded just about every community with drugs. I talked to the sheriff over in Johnson County, Buffalo, right? He told me that he cannot allow someone to go into the evidence locker without being suited up because they have no idea what has fentanyl on it. They have no idea. It could be a gun, it could be a bag of pot, it could be anything. And so national issues, and by the way, why are you people just focusing on national issues? That doesn't affect us here in Wyoming. But anyway, there are things that we can do on the front end that curb the necessary treatment of those things on the back end, right? If you follow the law, if you prosecute people, if you throw them in jail, it creates a deterrent. Less people getting hooked on drugs, less people need to throw in the jail. You see what I mean?
Jail will also help people get off of the drugs because you can't take the drugs most of the time. There are exceptions.
Sure.
And we've been talking about illicit drugs, and I don't want to get down another side road tangent, but the answer to everything these days, go to a doctor if you have a problem and he'll prescribe something for you.
Oh, yeah.
And, prescription drugs have just gone insane.
Let me tell you a quick story.
Okay.
So when I was first diagnosed with diabetes, I'm a little guy, and it hit me hard. Okay. I went from being able to pick up my motorcycle, just grab the handlebar if it was on the ground, pull it up with one arm, and I could set it back up with one arm. That was one day. A week later, after I had a what's called a DKA, it's basically a diabetic attack where I almost died. Blood sugar got too high and my heart couldn't pump it. Okay, I went from being able to pick up the bike with one arm, pull it up, to not being able to walk a week later. Also, my legs swelled up, and I got bad neuropathy. And I mean, it hurt so bad I was crying, and I don't cry very often. But I mean, it was the most painful thing I've ever been through. So go to the doctor. Hey, what can you do about this neuropathy? And to my doctor's credit, and this was in Tennessee, she prescribed gabapentin, which is supposedly supposed to help out nerves. Didn't work with me. So the next thing was oxycodone. And that really didn't help. And so then I got an appointment with a neurologist. Neurologist, right? Supposed to figure out what's going on with all your nerves. He gives me OxyContins. Okay, that worked for like 3 months, and they were 2 milligrams. And then he gives me 4 milligrams. And then by that time, I had pretty much moved back to Wyoming, but I still had a pretty sizable prescription. Got another OxyContin 4s. Well, I built up a tolerance to those. And so then he gives me, it was actually methadone, the drug they use to get heroin addicts off their addiction. Evidently, who knew this, but it's a painkiller. Well, built up a tolerance to that. And so then he prescribed me a fentanyl patch. And let me tell you, there's a reason why people get addicted to that stuff. And how I got off of that, interestingly enough, I had been on it for like 2 months. I didn't feel any pain, but I didn't feel anything else either. Well, my dad came over. We were living in Gillette at this time. My dad came over to the house, and I know that I felt like I was drooling when he showed up. I probably was drooling. And his exact response was, I don't know what you're on, but you're getting off of it right now. And so it was kind of painful for a while, but we went to the doctor, got my blood sugar figured out, got things back under control, and got off the drugs. But my point is that had we attacked the problem the correct way, that is vitamins, getting your blood sugar under control, doing everything you're supposed to be doing, there would have been no need for those high-powered narcotics. And so, yes, you do have doctors that prescribe those things. And with, my case was an extreme case. It still is. Okay. I don't have to take anything for it now. I've been clean and sober for, actually, it was 8 years on June 17th. Thank you. Haven't had a drink or anything for 8 years. Pretty proud of that. But it is also the fault of doctors. Some doctors, not all. But you're exactly right. Our go-to thing to solve any problem is here, take this pill. When in reality, if you fix your diet, if you fix you take some vitamins, we can fix a lot of those things. And that same principle applies to a lot of other societal problems that we have. If you prosecute people the way the law is written, it will deter people. That's kind of the whole point. Don't do this, or we're going to throw you in the slammer.
Yeah.
Don't go shoplift because you're going to jail. Don't drive drunk because we're going to take your license and you're going to jail.
Or don't keep letting them out to do the
Exactly.
same thing over and over again.
I know a gal I think she still lives in Buffalo, and I've since heard that she's cleaned up her life, got married, and that's a good thing. Okay, but she had 3 felony convictions for possession with intent to distribute methamphetamine, and the 3 of them. Okay. Now, in Wyoming, we don't really have a 3 strikes and you're outlaw, but out of 3 felonies, she spent 30 days in jail. That's it. Now, thankfully, she found the Lord and fixed her life and all of that, and she's doing good. Everything I've heard of. But maybe we could have kept it to 1 felony if we had actually followed the law and not let her off. But that's what I'm talking about here. We live in a society where we don't prosecute people the way that we should. We don't solve problems the way that we should. Instead of saying, hey, you got $3 billion to spend, we tell, we do that instead of saying, look, we'll give you 500 million. You better make it count. Which, and again, the dollar numbers that we're talking about are so friggin' huge that most people, I don't understand them. And actually, Ken, you and I had a conversation before you went to your first session. It was, all right, you and me think that $5,000 is a lot of money. Okay, $5,000 in legislator world, that's nothing, right? And it's pretty soon, $1 million doesn't feel like a lot of money. And then 5 million, and then 10 million. And then, hey, if it's not 100 million, really, why even worry about it?
Yeah, well, you're on to, there's one more bit of this that brings up one more topic, and it's about 1.5 minutes. But that topic is essentially this. Yeah, you and me, $5,000 is a good chunk.
That's a pretty good chunk.
The problem is that all this 90% of that $2 billion, most of it is going out to people, whether or not they should have ever gotten it in the first place. Now they're getting it, and they're dependent upon it. And so if you want to make a cut, somebody's going to be hurt. And that is one of the hardest things about legislating and working this
And hold
way.
on, before you play that, it's still Open Line Friday. If you want to call and talk about this or something else, the phone number here in the studio is 307-374-8989. Go ahead and give us a call. So let's play the rest of this, and then we're going to move on.
Yeah. By the way, that's the phone number because we couldn't get BR 549.
No, we couldn't get that one.
Here it goes.
Years ago, around these types of services, where is the state the safety net, whether it's in our state facilities that serve courts and law enforcement and counties, or in programs like this that there really is no viable alternatives in the nonprofit or private sector outside of government financing. I hope you see that reflected in our plan. We're certainly not perfect in execution in every ways, and we have a large organization that really comes down to principled policymaking and decisions of when you look at an agency with that large budget at around 5% overhead or administration, 90+% of those dollars are going out the door in form of reimbursement to providers, community organizations, et cetera. The challenge for this committee, the legislature, and the executive branch is more principled of what is nice to have and what is need to have. And should we be providing X, Y, or Z service? Should we be funding X, Y, or Z service at a certain level? And we're certainly a partner in that exercise, and we'll always take a deep dive and a look into where we can offset to fund other priorities. I think that's absolutely reasonable, but also reasonable to point out the challenges with that all of those dollars have a constituency or a customer behind them, however small or large scale those programs are. So I really appreciate those comments, Representative, and hopefully indicating that we'll certainly be a partner in that analysis.
So thank you for indulging me in that, and I hope that was helpful. I guess the gratifying thing is you feel like maybe somebody actually is listening to what you're saying.
Yeah, yeah, and
we might make some progress.
And a lot of times you look at these agencies and they really are like nameless, faceless bureaucrats. Maybe not in the state of Wyoming because it's pretty easy to get a hold of people that you can call and you can get somebody on the phone. Other states, it's not that way. Just a couple of quick comments, right? He said, well, there are no alternatives. Okay, now that may be absolutely true. Okay, that there may be no other services that people can access to fix whatever issue they're working with or they're dealing with. But the question is, why don't we have those other alternatives? It's because they have been replaced by government. And you can't tell me that people didn't have serious problems before the advent of our health department. Absolutely they did. So the question is, how did they attack those before? And part of the answer is through the private sector. And you heard Director Joe Hansen say, well, we just can't address them in the private sector. There aren't any other alternatives. Well, the reason for that is because you've relied on government too much to do that. And I can tell you for a fact, Ken, there are some very wealthy people in this country, in this state, that would help if we would ask them. There are a lot of people in Jackson that they're so darn rich that they have to give away money, right? They're going to give it to X, Y, or Z charity. They have to give it away or they're going to give it to the government.
Yeah.
So why would they not donate that to say, hey, there's this person that needs a visit to the Mayo Clinic? Why would they not do that? They would. The point is, we're not asking. And we don't live in a culture that would ask them anyway, by the way.
Yeah, there are several things in that. The culture has shifted. But, it used to be hospitals, education. Those were all extensions of the church originally.
Yes.
And then the government took them over. And now the churches and the universities, those sorts of things, it's just assumed that that's the government's job. Why should I go pay for another place when I'm already paying taxes?
Right.
So there's the trap.
So, I mean, a good example, and we're going to play this interview on Tuesday, but we interviewed Dr. Taylor Haynes the other day, and he wanted to talk about the land sales. And, there was a protest yesterday at the steps of the Capitol, and that's mostly what we talked about. But Dr. Haynes was a urologist, the only black doctor in Cheyenne in 1980. And he will tell you that the way that people came together is they helped, or the way that we solve problems is people come together and they fix things together. And I don't think that we live in that culture anymore, but that's not to say that we can't get back there. But we have to stop looking to government to solve all of our problems. Government is, as Ronald Reagan said, government is not the solution to our problems. Government is the problem. And the second thing I would say on that is Director Joe Hansen said, well, we have to decide what's nice to have and what's need to have. That's the wrong question. Okay. It's must have. The things that we should only pay for are those things that we have to have. It's not a question of it being nice or needing it. If you're in a situation where you need something, it's not essential. Because if it were, you would have already sacrificed everything you already have to pay for it. You would have been providing for that essential service. And so if there are those programs that we're paying for that are, this was just a nice one to have. We had the money laying around. And, so the wrong way of looking at it. The other thing is he says, well, there's some things that we can offset. If those things exist, we should have never done them in the first place. And I think that that's the point. But I do like the director. I mean, I do think that he's got the right attitude. I just think if, I were there, I'd put the screws to him a little bit more and say, hey, let's crank up your idea about tenfold. And let's really dive into the budget. But we're going to switch topics in just a minute. AOC running for president. You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live. You can listen to the program on YouTube, on Facebook, on X, on Rumble, pretty much everywhere. It's almost like I'm omnipresent. If you miss an episode of Cowboy State Politics Live, you can always go to the live replay, which is located at the website, cowboystatepolitics.com, under the live replay button. You can listen to Cowboy State Politics Live every Tuesday through Friday at 8 a.m. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program. Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live on YouTube, Facebook, X, and on Rumble. Don't forget about the Cowboy State Politics podcast. Today is Open Line Friday. If you want to be part of the show, the phone number is 307-374-8989. We're still going strong, and who knows, may have to go a little bit long today. We'll see how long-winded I am. But welcome back to the program. Before the break, we were talking about, the proper role of government and what is the proper role of government. And it's to only handle those things that are absolutely necessary. That we don't get to take taxpayer dollars and say, this would be kind of nice. We don't get to build stupid $3 million flower pots and then put bad art in the middle of them. If you're in Sheridan, you got to drive by the courthouse and go look at this thing. It's hideous. And we spent $3 million on it. That's not the role of the government.
The artwork you mentioned, it's a cult.
You know what? I Googled, if you go look at it, there's some really in one case, kind of a disturbing image on it.
Yeah, there are several. But
yeah, and I tried to do a Google search on them and really couldn't find anything. I was hoping that I would find something insidious that I could.
Yeah, we even searched. We used AI to try to figure it out, and basically it was symbols of fertility from all around the world. But
yeah,
I think that there's an attack on God in that.
Absolutely. I can't prove it, but I'm sure.
That's not our topic right now.
No, but it's the proper role of government. And just one quick comment, and then I want to move on. So this is the very reason why we can't do Medicaid expansion, is that once you give, and Medicaid expansion is unique, medical benefits are unique, in that legally, once you give them, you cannot take them away. So we get all these people on Medicaid, and this is the insidious nature of it. It's what the Democrats are counting on, actually, that once we give that medical benefit, we can't take it away, ever. And so it becomes a mandatory expenditure of the government. And again, it's just one of those areas that we should not be involved in.
I would just jump on that a little bit and say, what happens then when we have a competitive, such as it is, there's a lot of government interference. When you have hospitals that are competing they're gonna show more care, they're gonna show more compassion. The private hospitals, things like that are out there. If you turn it over to the government and make everything their job, that goes away, and you end up with things far worse than we see even in VA hospitals.
Yep, exactly right. Well, you finally did it, you lunatics. Maniacs, I tell you. And all of them evidently reside in the city of New York. But they got it done. It's for certain. Well, it's not certain yet, but the guy won the Democrat primary, allegedly. I mean, we are talking about Democrats, and I don't know exactly how, I mean, it was not really only like 5 or 7% of the people elected this guy because the voter turnout was so low. But there's an interesting piece by Ben Shapiro in the Daily Wire. And it is, in fact, entitled, "You Finally Did It, You Maniacs." We're now living in, and again, there's always some of these old, really great movies. And one of them, Planet of the Apes. It's great. Throw this picture. Yeah, everybody remember this one? So we're now living at the very end of the Planet of the Apes, when stunned Americans wander the beaches of New York City and find the Statue of Liberty half buried in the sand. That's because Zoran Mamdani, a communist, pro-jihadi, insane person who seems to have been bred in the laboratory at Columbia University, just to be a leftist pastiche, is now the mayoral frontrunner in New York City because he won the Democrat primary, and now he's on the way to being the mayor of America's largest city. According to the New York Times, quote, Zoran Mamdani, a little-known state lawmaker whose progressive platform and campaign trail charisma electrified younger voters, stunned former Governor Andrew Cuomo in the Democrat primary last Tuesday night. And he's building leads so commanding that Cuomo himself actually conceded. And that's absolutely true, my friends. But I've played for you a couple of times during this week that he has said some stuff that is just lunacy. He is an avowed communist. There's no doubt about it. There's an exchange with him and the host on the Bulwark podcast where he absolutely criticizes capitalism. And it's not to say that you can't criticize capitalism, but this guy, right after that, suggests of setting up government food stores. The only fascinating thing about that will be to find out how fast they fail. But he is an avowed communist. He refuses to denounce the Holocaust. He absolutely refuses to denounce the phrase "from the river to the sea." He has openly said globalize the intifada, which means that he's not so much a friend of Israel. Do you know how many Jews live in New York City? I don't know. I don't have an exact number, but it's a lot. And this guy, allegedly, is about to be elected mayor. But, Ken, it does open the door for some other people. If the Democrats can get an avowed communist elected as, at least he won the primary anyway, if he can do that, and again, he's a radical, it may open the door for other radicals. And I just think, put together a list of the radicals who may want to run for higher office. Well, it might have been fueling rumors from AOC and get this, for a 2028 presidential run. And I quote from the New York Post, a speculation swirling about Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's plans for 2028 after she successfully endorsed dark horse socialist, strike that word, communist Zoran Mamdani in a heated New York City Democratic mayoral primary. Many observers believe that the lefty squad member will try to move up from her House seat, whether to the Senate or even the White House, in the aftermath of Mamdani's stunning upset over Andrew Cuomo. And it just so happens that I really hope that AOC does want to run for higher office. I think it would be an excellent race if, in fact, she ran for, say, president. And it's so much so that I went ahead and found perhaps her first campaign ad. Check this one out.
Whom do you believe to be the head of the Democratic Party?
Some say AOC has the brains to lead the Democrats.
Ceasefire means that somebody sees a fire.
We thought pulling the alarm would open a door.
There's a vote clock that's going down. The exits that are normally open are suddenly closed.
Pull the fire alarm?
So it could be any kind of fire.
You use the term the occupation of Palestine. What did you mean by that?
AOC is an advocate for peaceful protest in America.
The leadership of those peaceful
student-led protests on campuses like Columbia, Yale, Berkeley, and many others.
Will the real leader of the Democratic Party stand up?
This young star's understanding of the law is airtight.
No.
RICO, you're obviously not familiar with.
Excuse me, sir. RICO is not a crime. It is a category. Our current leadership was appointed.
Yep.
It was not elected.
Yep.
That Donald Trump will become the 47th president of the United States.
She authored the Green New Deal to reduce our carbon footprint. Wait, is she flying private? She is a fighter for all American citizens.
The return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia.
Oh, never mind.
This is our moment.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the leader we probably don't need.
I disagree. I think that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez needs to run for president in 2028. Now, I've had a lot of people get kind of scared when I suggest that. Well, I don't know. She's got a lot of support. If you thought Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were fun on the campaign trail, you just wait until AOC is out there. My gaffe reels will be almost endless. It will be a constant parade of dumb stuff that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has said. So anyway, I mean, just something to think about. I mean, I don't see why we shouldn't absolutely encourage her to run. Now, yet another Looney Tune that in Congress, and there's a lot of them, many of them you haven't heard of yet, but Latifah Simon, she was in a hearing talking about DEI and the problems associated with it. And let me see here. I'm just going to go ahead and play. Here we go. Latifah Simon. You notice, I mean, the stack of stuff, and I should probably explain how the stack of stuff comes to be. I just start printing stuff that I find interesting, and it usually starts the night before. And I just kind of pile it up, and then before the show, I put it in a little bit of an order, maybe, that kind of makes sense to me, but it never ends up that way. I'm reminded, hey, we should talk about that story right now. So this is the case here from the Daily Wire. Keep Dr. King's name out of your mouth, says Democrat Representative Latifah Simon. Blows her top at the GOP witnesses, quoting MLK. And I quote from the Daily Wire. Democrat California Representative Latifah Simon lashed out at Republican witnesses at the House Oversight Committee on Wednesday for quoting Dr. Martin Luther King. Simon told witnesses to quote, keep King's name out of their mouths during a hearing on diversity, equity, and inclusion. The witnesses she addressed were Dan Lennington of the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty and Judge Glock from the Manhattan Institute and Eric Smith from the Cato Institute. She says, and I quote, there are so few folks who've actually studied and is clear on the theology of Dr. King. Very few of you read and studied and have sat in the Ebenezer Baptist Church. And clearly, if you've not done those few things, then you have no room to talk about Dr. King. But here's what the venerable representative from the great state of California had to say. Check this out.
This is a very, very difficult conversation. I'm a great granddaughter of someone who had a literal yoke on her neck, a literal yoke. And I will give the 4.5 minutes of my time to my people from Malvern, Arkansas, from those fields. And I want to be clear.
All right, from those fields? Those people aren't alive anymore. I don't know who she thinks elected her, but California was not a slave state, okay? Now, she claims to be from Arkansas, but there's nobody alive that was enslaved. Anybody who is a relative, a descendant of slavery, is probably definitely several generations down the road. And I am so sick to death of people claiming to be, owed something, reparations, or we have to provide them some sort of venerance because they're distant relative who they've never met, who they probably know very little about. And because of that, they're owed something. I'm sick to death of it.
Yeah, we forget that not all slaves were black.
Good point. Good point.
Irish and others, maybe
Yes.
we need those reparations too.
Yes, we do. Okay, let's continue here.
That 4 out of the 5 of you last year posted on your social media the words of Dr. King.
How dare
And there are
you.
so few folks who actually have studied, who are clear on the theology of freedom of King. Very few of you have read and studied and have sat in Ebenezer Baptist Church. So
Yeah,
I
you
would
can't
ask
talk
you,
about
you
him unless
keep
you've done that.
Dr. King's name out of your mouth. If you, like me and the many scholars who will be watching, studied King, you know that he and the mothers and the fathers of the civil rights movement and of the movement for emancipation.
All right, I can't handle her anymore. So my point is that it is all grandstanding. It is all performative. It is all, none of it really has to do with actually making any policy. It is all, and from Latifah Simon, it is all overt racism. How dare you talk about Martin Luther King if you've never sat in his church or you studied him, if you're not like me? Now, I doubt that Latifah Simon has really studied all that much of anything because, let's see here. Here we go. Here's a little bit about her biography. She served as the Bay Area on the Rapid Transit Board of Directors and the Board of Trustees of the California State University System. Yeah, she's an academic. She served as a trustee of the San Francisco Foundation and president of Meadow Fund, a community investment fund created by Patricia Quillen, the wife of Netflix co-owner Reed Hastings. In 2023, she became the youngest woman to receive the MacArthur Fellowship for her leadership for the Center of Young Women's Development in San Francisco at the age of 19. She was appointed to her office by Jerry Moonbeam Brown. There are no really qualifications there to say, and frankly, you shouldn't be telling anybody that they can't mention Dr. King's name. How ridiculously ignorant of her. That just because you don't happen to be like her, we can't say things like we should focus on the content of someone's character except for the color of her skin. But of course, she can't do that because probably the only qualification she has is the color of her skin, and she fundamentally believes that that's what qualifies her for just about any position whatsoever. Absolutely ridiculous. But these are the type of people that get elected to Congress now. That it's those folks who are so blatantly racist that, if you're a white person, well, then you better just not talk about Dr. King. I mean, just ridiculous. And again, this is one of those things that absolutely is a problem in Wyoming. We do have racists here. I could play you a lot of sound bites from several different committees. And I guess perhaps we should broaden this out to all types of bigotry, whether you're white or you're black or you're a man. And that's an interesting one because I did find an interesting piece here. It's entitled, "Feminists Are Begging Men to Come Back, but They Still Want to Blame Them for Everything." Now, this was put out, authored by Brandon Smith of the altmarket.us. So it's another kind of, off the beaten path news article, but it's fascinating because there was a piece in the New York Times, and this is what he's responding to here. But here's what it said in the New York Times. Quote, "We knew what worked. We knew how to frame a face, a gesture, a moment of implication, just enough to ignite fantasy and open a wallet. I came to understand in exact terms what cues tempt the average 18 to 36-year-old cis heterosexual man. What drew him in, what kept him coming back. It wasn't intimacy, it wasn't mutuality, it was access to simulation, clean, fast, and frictionless. That dynamic has quietly collapsed, and we have moved into an era where many men no longer seek women to impress other men or to connect across difference. They perform elsewhere, alone. They've filtered us out." Well, the people that are being filtered out are the radical feminazis. And now, before you jump off the wagon and say that I'm insulting all women, I'm not. There are actually only a very few number of feminazis. Now, these are the radical feminists who took a movement that was actually a pretty good thing, equal pay, equal rights, and they transformed it into something like Catherine McKinnon, This is a name you probably don't know, but Catherine McKinnon was one of these egghead professors. And she may have worked at Wisconsin or Michigan, not exactly sure. But her main argument, and she taught philosophy, but her main thing was that all sex is rape and that all men are rapists. And even if you're engaging in, if you're a married couple, well, that's rape too. You just don't know it. And so Catherine McKinnon, along with other people like Judith Butler, constantly bashed men, is that the patriarchy is the source of all of the problems with women. All the while, this country, and men for that matter, have advocated for crazy things like giving women the right to vote and equal pay for equal work and all of those things. But now, what feminists, specifically the feminazis like Catherine McKinnon and Judith Butler, have noticed is that those very men that they blamed for everything have started to ignore them. And she says, and I quote, "There was a time not so long ago that even when a one-night stand might end with tangled limbs and a shared breakfast." And again, this is in the New York Times, okay? This is not, I'm quoting here. Even the act of staying the night didn't announce a relationship, just a willingness to be human for a few hours. The idea that vulnerability is a threat instead of an invitation has created a culture of hesitation, of men circling intimacy but never entering it. And the results is thousands of tiny silos, everyone performing closest, but no one committing. Loneliness, a hunger for that. So here's what I'll say. You're missed, not just by me, but by the world you once helped shape. Well, the problem here with feminism is it intentionally wants to blame men for everything. And this is the type of bigotry that I'm talking about. We went from feminism being a main course in university classes to it irritating so many people that they've forgotten about people like Catherine McKinnon and Judith Butler. And, I take just about any opportunity I can to play a little Rush Limbaugh on the program. So I think what we should probably do is listen to Rush.
I have for years, for almost 6 years on radio now, and for coming up on 2 years on TV, I have been trying to convey the impression that militant feminism is what's defined as mainstream feminism, that the spokesmen for feminism today are really women who have nothing in common or very little in common with the mainstream American woman and her thinking. But yet they are the women to whom the media goes for the official pronouncements on what women think of a Supreme Court appointee or any other issue. And I've gotten in a lot of trouble with this because this has been assumed by mainstream women that I'm being critical of all women if I disagree with feminism. I think feminism at a time was honorable. It had some objectives that were just common sense, equal pay for equal work, equality of opportunity, independence, and so forth and so on. It's gone way beyond that now. Mainstream feminism today is defined by such people as Catherine McKinnon, a law professor at the University of Michigan, who says, this is the problem, she's conducting classes where young women in school are being indoctrinated with this stuff, and one of her primary beliefs is that all sex is rape, even the sex of marriage. Even if you're a woman and you're in love and you are having conjugal relations with your husband, you're still being raped, you just don't know it. Now, that's not mainstream, that's extremism. And it ought to be thought of as such. It ought to be portrayed as such, but it's not. It's never challenged. And every time I get an example of this kind of madcap extremism, I like to show you. And so here it is. Now, you may never have heard of Central Washington University. I hadn't either. It's in a little town in Washington, but it is a university, and this is where liberals have gained control. Liberals control the institute.
So, that pretty much sums it up, right? So, it is not an indictment of all women. Rather, it is an indictment of the bigoted movement of feminism, and it fits right in with. And here's the reason why I brought this up. We get caught up talking about DEI, that we have to have diversity on in the workplace and on college boards and diversity and everything. But really, it is all Marxism. And I wanted to give you another example of cultural Marxism that fits with all of this other bigotry. You see, and quoting from the piece that was published in zerohedge.com, we're spending responding to this New York Times piece. Feminism, like all Marxist movements, is obsessed with power. Everything they do is driven by a desire to power and for power and control, not just over their own lives, but over the world around them. Most feminists say that they want the same power as a man. Okay, sure, we're okay with that. But they need to accept that no matter how much the scales are tipped in the favor through laws, government subsidies, easy college grants, DEI hiring, and unfair divorce, we people are fundamentally different. And that is the point, that we cannot proceed from an assumption that everybody is the same or that everybody can be the same, because frankly, we're not. Men and women are different. Some people are smarter than others. Some people are more skilled on the ball field than others. Some make better mothers than others. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. People are different, and we have to accept that they are, instead of trying to entrench in law that we have to all be treated the same. And it's, that's where all this DEI stuff goes. I mean, it's where, the division, if you want to understand why the Democrat Party is failing, is they continue to go back to failed ideologies like DEI, like the radical feminazis, like all of them. And it's always division with them. And essentially, that's what is being rejected by the American people. That most normal people like me, Agent 29, everybody else, understand that people are fundamentally different, and we have different skills and abilities and all of that. And instead of creating different categories to service one constituency or another, we just accept that people are different, accept that they all have gifts, and that's what makes this country the amazing place that it is. Well, we've burned up another busy open line Friday, though we didn't get any calls. That's all right. We had a lot of great discussion, and we're going to do this again on Tuesday, where we're going to have an interview with Dr. Taylor Haynes. It's a pretty interesting discussion. We haven't heard from him in a while, but don't miss Weekend Update on the podcast. It'll be released tomorrow. For now, I'm David Iverson, and this is Cowboy State Politics. Have a good weekend, my friends.